Hey friends, welcome to my channel. I'm AmandaMuse, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's video is talking all about mental health and antidepressants. So if that is triggering to you, then maybe this isn't the video for you. I do have a lot of content here on YouTube, so feel free to skip this one and find another video that maybe is more upbeat and more your jam. You know, whenever I share something especially sensitive like this topic, it's always in the tone of what has worked for me, and that doesn't mean it's going to work for you or for anyone for that matter, because all of our experiences are so unique to us, right? With that in mind, let's jump right into this. In June 2021, I started taking antidepressants, and I shared this journey on YouTube. You're welcome to go watch it. Maybe you can watch that one first and then come back here to this video, and it'll give you a better understanding of some of the reasons why I went on it and then how that journey unfolded. So I started taking them in June. And then by October, I had released a video that really covered the first 3 months of taking the antidepressants, the ups, the downs, just some of the symptoms, honestly, in how we can feel in our bodies as we start a new medication. So if you want to watch that first, then come back here. I'll be here. I'll wait. Reasons I went on antidepressants, I really go into detail in that video, but the deciding factor for me is when I started to realize that my day-to-day life was being very much affected by my mental health. I was really struggling, kind of in all areas of my life, but as a result of immense stress that I had been under for such a long period of time. I work out regularly, or at least I try to. I go to talk therapy regularly. I share with the people that love me and I love them in my life, like a very safe space for sharing. Even with all of those things, movement, at the time I wasn't really doing meditation, but really just kind of checking all those things that are supposed to help and make you feel better. And yet still, I was struggling. And most of my symptoms, I would say, the biggest symptom was a panic attack. They're very debilitating. It's not a term I use lightly. I experience them typically at night, and I would get these long-lasting panic attacks where you just feel like you're on the brink of something terrible. And I remember speaking to my family doctor, and I can't remember if it was my family doctor or my therapist, but it was something along the lines of, the question was, at what point does a person decide to take an antidepressant? And the response was, when your day-to-day life is impacted. And I sat with that for a little bit, and then I made the decision to start taking this antidepressant. At the time, my husband was on a furlough, which means he didn't have a job. He's now back to work, and so we're going to get into this. At the time this was occurring, my husband was without work. He had been laid off from his job. He's a pilot, and because of the world and the state that we were in for the past few years, we weren't exactly flying places. And that stress of carrying the family financially, despite there being things and opportunities my husband was helping, and we definitely are a team, you can't really avoid some of that stress. And as best as I tried, I could not get rid of it. And it was really starting to impact me, and I actually couldn't work properly. And in order for us to survive, one of the teammates has got to be really bringing in an income properly. So I needed to get a handle on this. The antidepressants really helped, like life-changing helped. Now, could it have been a placebo effect? I suppose, but I truly did not have any more panic attacks. And even when I was put in situations where it would typically trigger me, side note to that, I hadn't been triggered by panic in a really long time, like at least a decade or so. So it was very shocking that all of this stuff and all of these symptoms was coming back into my life. And so all of a sudden, once the medication was in my body for a long period of time, like that 3-month type of thing, and I was at a 10 milligram dose of escitalopram, by the way, because I realized I didn't share that piece in my first video. I think a part of me was just like wanting to keep that information private, but that's what I was on, a 10 milligram dose. I started at 5 milligrams and then I worked up to 10, which from my understanding is actually considered a half dose. So I was on a half dose of escitalopram, also known as Cipralex and SSRI, for a year. Just about. And so, yeah, it was like a game changer. I felt incredible. I could see people, again, in social situations and not come home and have a panic attack for like 7 hours at night. So it was It was doing what it was supposed to do. And then, of course, after having shared the video, there's so many comments about people in support, but also people saying, I did the same thing and there were all of these symptoms. So we can't ignore the fact that there are going to be potential side effects from being on a medication like an SSRI. Typically, the big ones are lowered sex drive, weight gain, and then eventually numbing out. And I didn't experience any of those things for quite some time. However, I would say, when did I really start to notice it? I can't really put my finger on the exact time, but I feel like as we entered into the new year, so as we got into January, February, March, I noticed I didn't dip as low as I typically do because of seasonal depression, because I had, this awesome tool of an SSRI helping me along. But I did notice that my sex drive started to go a little low, and I do consider myself a pretty above average person in terms of that part of my life. So I was like, it's fine. I just kind of balanced out. I'm not over the top. It brought me down to a regular person's sex drive. I don't know. But then that started to get really low. And I was like, And then I noticed weight gain, a significant amount, 20 pounds more than my base weight. But I really sat with that and I was like, meh, people put on weight as they get older. How is that making me feel? And I noticed that I was struggling with it. Not so much in the sense of what society deems me to be an appropriate weight, for my height or whatever, but more I didn't feel good in my body. As most of you know, if you're not new to my channel, I'm a really active person. I'm always doing something. In the last few years, it's maybe been a little less, but not even. I love to bike ride. I love to go for walks. I love to exercise. I have a workout room in my house. We converted a bedroom to a workout space. It's actually it's one of my favorite rooms in this whole house. But we did that because I truly get a lot of joy out of moving my body and sweating and exerting myself. And I noticed that motivation honestly just up and disappeared. Not only did I not have the motivation, but I believe that because of the weight gain, my endurance was really low. And I would get on the Peloton and do a ride that would normally be nothing. And I'd be winded and could barely get through it and barely get to the level of output that I'm accustomed to. And I was like, that's weird. And I think I started to notice that in March, April. Because at the same time, March, April, my husband was re-employed. So when you're furloughed from an airline, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but at our airline, because it was as a result of unforeseen circumstances, he didn't lose his job. He always had his employee number. And so now he's been hired back and he's just back in there on the seniority list and back to work. So when he got rehired, I was like, oh my gosh, the stress just kind of melted off me. Now, if you've been following this last little series, it was not like an overnight melting. It was a process to release some of that stress. But then I noticed, okay, well, as the stress was going away, I was like, okay, I should be just getting back into living again, my normal Amanda lifestyle. And I just couldn't do it. That entered the bike experience where my endurance was shot. And I was like, what is going on? And I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm getting older. But I'm only 38. You know what I mean? What's going on here? And then I think the kicker was all of a sudden, I say the words, I numbed out. What does that mean for me? I just wasn't having really big emotions or very big sad emotions. Nothing too happy, nothing too sad. I was just coasting along. And I'm a very animated, joie de vie. I live large and I feel the things and I cry once a day from a sad video or something. I'm very in tune with my emotions, And I just felt uninspired to create content, which PS is kind of my job. So that was a little bit messing with my brain because I was like, well, am I burnt out or what's going on here? And I got to be honest, I think it was kind of a lot happening at once, but I realized that the one common denominator here was this damn antidepressant. And so I started talking to people about it in my life. I started talking to Dean, my husband, about it. And then I started talking to my sister and people in my life who have been on antidepressants or potentially are still on them. And I started talking to them about some of my symptoms and experiences, which PS is also just like good life practice to share, because in sharing some of these more vulnerable things, you might actually get support where you least expect it or validation for some of your feelings. And then I started talking to my therapist about it, and I was like, do you think maybe like I've reached my limit of needing these anymore? And we started to talk through that. But the biggest worry I had was some of the horror stories I've heard about coming off of an antidepressant. I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Because some of the things you hear are kind of scary. You hear terms like brain zaps, you hear like withdrawal symptoms, which it's different from a withdrawal to something that would be addictive. This is not an addictive type of medication, but your brain starts to enjoy the serotonin you keep giving it without having to produce its own serotonin. So your brain kind of has to like kick into high gear again and start making its own. So before that kicking in happens, there's a period where you're like low on serotonin. I am not a doctor, but I'm just going off of what makes sense, right? If you're taking a pill and it's giving you serotonin and then you stop taking that pill, your body naturally produces serotonin, but it might take a minute for that to like start working like it should, right? It's been on vacation for like a year. I was really nervous about how I was going to react symptom-wise to coming off of it. And I should probably preface this whole damn thing by saying that one of my biggest anxious triggers is health anxiety, specifically for me. When I get sick, I get very triggered. I have some baggage, some skeletons in my closet from being a child with a very close family member who is got a lot of problems around attention and illness. And so that's really messed with my head. And it's something I work through a lot of the time. But it's something that sometimes, as a trigger does, it shows up without you being able to control it, right? And so managing your anxiety is somehow trying to find a way to manage some of these triggers and understand them and understand yourself a little better. But the fact that I am triggered by health anxiety means that the concept of coming off of this pill was freaking me out, because I'm like, oh no, I'm going to feel bad, and then that's going to trigger me and I'm going to get a panic attack from coming off the damn pills. You feel me? So I was a little bit worried. And then I sat with it. And then I happened to have a family doctor coming up. I had an appointment coming up. I experienced some stuff in the last 2 years. I had a little skin cancer situation. I kind of went through some things, and so I'm really on top of my appointments, right? As a grown-up. Take care of yourself. And so when I was sitting with my family doctor, I was like, all right, I was going through the list, of things I wanted to talk about, and one of them was coming off of an antidepressant. And she was actually like, hey, if you're feeling good, this is an amazing time to do it. One, she said, they recommend that when people go on an antidepressant that they try it out for a year and then try to come off of it actually to see how you're doing. And then if you need it again, like no shame in that game, you can go back on the antidepressant if you want. So she's like, this is perfect because you started it in June of 2021 and here we are pretty much almost a year later. Good timing. And then we both agree that it's also a really good time to do it because it's summertime here in Ontario, in Canada, and where I live in Ontario, and which means sunny days, lots of beautiful vitamin D, happy vitamins kind of being shot at you left, right, and center. So, it maybe would be a little easier to come off the pill now versus in the darker, cooler months. So I was like, I'm ready. My husband's back to work. The stress is gone. The financial burden on me is gone. Things seem to be like coming back around. We're getting it back out in the world again. There's just hope and excitement. And I'm numbing out, my sex drive is low, and I cannot seem to drop this weight that is on my person. What's going on, right? So I decided to bite the bullet and start the weaning process, because I will say this, please do not come off of any medication without speaking to your doctor. In fact, I'm going to put this at the top of the video because you need the support and you need to go about it properly, because some cases, like with this particular medication I was on, there are symptoms and side effects that you're able to actually help mitigate. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this awful, awful experience. So because I was only on a 10 milligram dose, what we did is we dropped down to 5 milligrams for 2 weeks, and then that was it. There was the opportunity, if I wanted to, then cut the 5, so I had like a pill, and then I cut it in half for the 5 milligram, and she's like, if you want, you can cut it even further and do a week of like 2.5 milligrams. Maybe in hindsight, I would have done that because I did have some pretty wicked symptoms coming off of this. So let's just get into that. Symptoms coming off. I felt fine over the 2-week period with the 5 milligrams. Felt like normal. The first day or so, I was like really like paying attention to my symptoms, thinking, am I going to get brain zaps? What even is a brain zap? But like, honestly, nothing happened. So that was 2 weeks. And then pretty much the second I was fully off of it, it got real. I had extreme nausea. So I had little bouts of nausea throughout the 5 milligram experience, the 2-week period, but that hit me full throttle when I went like off. Really bad nausea. Started getting some pretty like wicked headaches, and then the brain zaps. I spoke a little bit about brain zaps in a video recently because I was vlogging, so I'll link it there and you can kind of hear me go into it as I'm like in situ experiencing it. But from what I read, basically it's when you move your eyes from left to right, not so much up and down, but left to right does something, and it almost feels like if you took a lighter and like, you know, like you're trying to start a lighter, that little that, it's how it feels. You just, like it kind of brain zaps. So that's brain zap. And they were awful, like really awful. And I hated every second of it. And I was like, please make this end. Because of course, I'm sure if you're like me and you experience a symptom of any kind, you're like, hey Google, what's going on there? And some people could have them for like 3 weeks. I was like, no, please no. I think all in, I had them for about 10 days, maybe airing on 2 weeks. And the last couple days were less intense. And it could be because I used these little acupressure beads that go in your ears. I attended this really cool camp for moms, and it was a couple of days. It was a work event. And there was a woman there who dealt with these little beads that you put on your ears. My dad just showed up. There's lots going on. Life has resumed. Okay, so bear with me. Where was I? Bad side effects. That's where I was. Okay, so the brain zaps were the worst. The nausea was pretty rough. What was interesting is I, as a result of the nausea, lost my appetite. So what I've found is that part of the reason that you can have weight gain when you're on an SSRI, when you're on an antidepressant, is because the pill actually can make you a little hungrier. And I would suggest that that's possibly true. I'm not much of a snacker kind of person. I don't typically snack in between meals unless I'm like, I don't know, really active that day or something. But I eat my 3 meals and I have like a little snack with a coffee at about 2 p.m. But not all the time. And so what I noticed is that since coming off of the pills, I am not snacky like at all. I don't need to eat anything when I watch TV in the evenings, where before I was hungry. So I think there must be some truth to that. Not so much that it just randomly makes you gain weight, it's that it actually increases your hunger. Don't quote me on it. My appetite now seems to have returned to normal. I have ability to work out. I'm not kidding. Once I came out of that 10-day situation of coming off of the pills, like I'll say in that time, I was really low energy. I didn't really have the motivation to work out. When I did my first workout post coming off of the pills, I felt so euphoric that I almost burst into tears because my energy was back. I don't know if that's a placebo effect or what, but I felt like untethered. I don't know if you've seen this picture on the internet, and if I can find it, I'm going to put it in here, but I'll try to do a visual example here. It's like if you can imagine highs, lows, and people are floating around in here, up and down and up and down and flat and whatever, right? I feel like when you're on an antidepressant, for me, my highs and lows kind of shrunk. So I was coasting in this area. Not too high, not too low. Everything was smooth, calm waters. Things didn't really affect me like they once did. I didn't find myself getting too ragey or too upset. Like it was just kind of do. Well, it felt like after that first, 2 weeks, and even now, but now I feel like I'm kind of balancing out again. In that little bit, it's like the floodgates opened and I was like untethered to all these emotions. And I felt very, very vulnerable. Like stuff really triggered me. It really shocked me that I was so bothered by a seemingly small thing. I'd love to know your experience if you've experienced this coming off of an antidepressant. But it's like, it's like what I thought was done bothering me. All of a sudden I'm off an antidepressant and that protective shell that was all around me was gone, that little barrier, and I could feel all the feelings again. And now, where I am in my mental health journey is working with my therapist and myself to put the tools back in place to help me feel prepared for life's experiences. So, I've actually truly begun meditating. I've started a meditation. I actually use my Apple Watch and Apple Fitness, and it's incredible. I almost exclusively use Apple Fitness for their meditation feature because it hooks up to the watch and my AirPods, and I just do my meditation, and I try to tack it on to the end of a workout. If not, end of the day is really helpful. And I'm at 10 minutes now, so I can go for 10 minutes and I find it really helpful. And 20 minutes doesn't seem so daunting anymore. So that's really exciting to me. But I'm bringing in meditation because what I find's happening is I feel a little untethered sometimes, and I'm a really visual person, and I do feel like I need to bring myself back down to earth, and that's what meditation does. It helps me calm, it helps me regulate my breathing, and it's really working. The working out is back. I feel super excited about it again. I started getting those deep, gross sweats going on, which are just euphoric to me. I absolutely love it. And the big thing is weight training is probably the biggest noticeable difference that I'm like, oh my God, I really want to do weight training again. Where for the longest time, I just had zero motivation. Which may have nothing to do with an antidepressant. I acknowledge all of that, but I'm just sharing because I think that in sharing, it allows you and your experiences to be validated if they're similar, right? They don't have to be similar, but sometimes we don't even realize what's going on when we're in the situation ourselves. So this has kind of been my journey so far. I will say my weight hasn't really budged, the number on the scale, which I'm not overly obsessed with, although I've noticed just in my face, it's gotten a little bit less, who doesn't like a little extra something fills out the wrinkles, but I've noticed it's kind of slimming down a little bit, and my body, I feel like I have more control over my body, which I like feeling that way. I like feeling that when I make a meal that's an appropriate size portion, I feel good after it. I don't have to have a second dinner an hour later or something. So that feels really nice. I feel really good about feeling things fully because I think for a little bit there I really did numb out. A message I really want to relay in this video is that if you are someone who has struggles with mental health in the sense that you will likely be on an antidepressant for your whole life, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Because there are people in my life who I pray never come off of an antidepressant because they require it, right? For me, I feel like the level of stress I was under was very specific and not a permanent situation. So I didn't require a permanent solution. Now, having spoken with my family doctor, she very clearly said, if you find when you come off of your antidepressants that you're still struggling, there is nothing wrong with going back on them. That made me feel really seen and validated, and just helped me kind of work through some of that shame that can exist with mental health struggles. So that made me feel really good. I will say now here I am in early July, and so it kind of was the month of June that I was coming off of them, and I feel like my old self. My libido is coming back. It's not where it was, but I just think that some of this stuff is going to take a little bit of time for my brain to get back to normal ops, right? And I realized it wasn't an immediate flip of the switch to go on the antidepressants. And similarly, I think it's going to be a slow burn coming off of them, where it's going to take some time to get back to myself, because it's never just one thing. It's never just the antidepressant. It's the time I invest in myself, the self-care, the movement, the meditation, the socialization. There's like so many little things that create a healthy, well person. And that is really important to acknowledge, because I realized that coming off of the pill, I still have a lifestyle that I've acquired over the last year, which involved snacks after dinner and a little bit more sedentary. And so there's things that I'm like really paying attention to and trying to bring more movement into my life, and also just allow myself to feel things again. Because I noticed, in the last 2 weeks, I'd be really triggered by something and feel really upset. Like, why am I feeling this so deeply? Am I okay? Is everything okay? But also just like taking a time to have some grace for myself and say, yeah, you're feeling things and that's okay. And it is triggering whatever took place, XYZ. And here's something you can do to make yourself feel better. Go for a swim, do a meditation, call someone you love, watch a favorite show. I don't know, like, all of those tools that help us feel better are so specific to our own experiences. But I just think it's important for me to share this journey with you so that you kind of have a full picture. Do I think that antidepressants are bad because the experience coming off of them was bad? Absolutely not. They serve a purpose. They greatly improved my life for approximately a year, at least 10 months. I was able to function. The panic attacks were gone. A common question I get is, why didn't you just take a different pill for panic attacks? Because those do exist, and it would be more of as needed type of pill. The reason I didn't go on that type of medication is because typically, if you research that, they are extremely addictive, typically fall into the benzo land. Those types of heavy prescriptions like scare the living shit out of me. And so there's absolutely no way I would go on a pill like that. Like, that wasn't even an option. I thought that's what I wanted when I first met with my doctor, until she explained how severe the addiction can be, and that can take you down a path that you may not want to go down. There is addiction in my family history, and no thank you. I was not about to expose myself to something that could potentially really mess with me as a person because of my family history. So those temporary fixes, not for me, and I would really, really, really like to emphasize how risky they are, and please work with a doctor about them. And I'm not talking a doctor that just quickly writes a prescription and hands it over. I'm talking like someone who spends time with you as a specific, unique person with unique experiences and family history, and talk through your options, okay? Like, that can be devastating. It scares me. So that was not an option. The thing with an escitalopram, with an SSRI, is it actually helps manage your panic attacks while also being suitable for people who experience anxiety and depression. So it can work wonders for people, right? I did have the opportunity to speak with a psychiatrist just briefly, actually in a social situation, but I asked them the question about, this brain zaps and all of this kind of stuff. And she had a really interesting way that she helps people wean and taper off of their antidepressants. She actually prescribes a different medication while they're weaning. I think it was like Prozac or something like that. Don't quote me on this, but I think that there are options to help make the weaning process a little easier. I should also preface I would also like to point out that I was only on antidepressants for about 10 months before I started to wean. If you've been on them for 10 years, your weaning process may look a little different. You may want to take it a little slower, right? So there are so many variables in this experience, but overarching, antidepressants were amazing and truly impacted my life in a positive way when I chose to go on them. They helped until they stopped helping. And like anything in life, we have free will to decide when something isn't working anymore, right? And so at that point, with the support of my loved ones and family doctor and therapist, I went off of the pills. The process was a little painful, but here I am, a month later, feeling great. They did the trick. If I ever needed to go on antidepressants again, I would, but I would still take that time to do everything else before absolutely needing it. I will say that I never had thoughts, I'm going to phrase this appropriately because, I don't want this video to get flagged, but I never had thoughts of doing anything to myself as a person in a bad way. That was never part of my anxious feelings or anything like that. So that would be the only time, if I ever went down that road, where I would immediately look for a solution to help me in terms of medication. But that's not something I struggle with. So for me, it's more like, how can I manage the stress? How can I manage the anxiety? Am I getting enough sleep, rest? Kind of like treat yourself like a houseplant, right? Is people speaking to me nicely? Like, can I get enough sunshine in my life? Like, filtered water, like all of these important things. So that's been my journey. I feel like there's so much more I could say, and I just want you to know that you always have me in your court when it comes to taking care of yourself, and your mental health and the way that you feel in your body right now is important. And if you feel bad, there are solutions out there, and some of them might take a little bit more work on your part, and that's okay. You're worth putting the effort in there for. So I wish you well on your journey. I hope you enjoyed hearing about mine. Like I said, I'm going to put a playlist actually together of all the videos that I mentioned today, and kind of like this journey throughout, just to give you a real well-rounded look at what my experience was like, and maybe it might help you in your journey. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next week with a brand new video. Bye, guys.